Many are predicting that the worst is yet to come, which is unfortunate, said one person here. Until now, they've enjoyed the reputation of being the nation's icebox.
Watched a burglar in his home this morning by webcam.
As a journalist of over 25 years, stories are what make my world turn.
Reporting live from the Dallas newsroom tonight, Jeff Crilley, Fox 4 News.
But in 2008, I took the jump from my familiar life and started a PR firm from my home.
We're talking about anyone with a camcorder like the one I'm using becomes a television network.
We started slowly growing the company, and we now have over 100 clients, and we've branched into the world of live digital broadcasting. I now own 8 different TV studios and have a huge team, and the stories that I now get to share are sometimes the most important of my life. Life has a funny way of coming around full circle. This is the Jeff Crilley Show.
On this episode, we're going to be talking about battling head trash. And when I think about head trash, I think about the athlete who is pressured to make that free throw, and they've got too much head trash and they miss. And then there are other athletes, Michael Jordan comes to mind, where as soon as it leaves his fingertips, he knows it's going in because he can just visualize that. To talk about head trash and how to battle head trash, Maymi, best-selling author and speaker, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Now, I should have warned you, there is a gun law, and you're not supposed to bring those in.
Well, in Texas, you're licensed to carry.
That's it. Heavily armed. Well, you are a best-selling author and speaker, and you go around the country during times when we're not social distancing, motivating people. How did this all begin for you?
Well, I've lived the life of an entrepreneur since I was 13 years old. I grew up in Spanish Harlem, a place called El Barrio. And the interesting thing about living in a barrio is that there's only 2 trajectories. Either you fall prey to the environment, or you look beyond it and try to do something special with your life, right? So I was in the latter. And as an entrepreneur of 13 years old, really fighting for the things that I would want, because we didn't have that economically able to afford the things that I would have wanted at the time, I had to go out and figure out ways to make money. So that developed an entrepreneurial flair in me, and over the years, it just expanded into different dimensions and different experiences and expressions. So I'm very familiar with what it takes oftentimes when you're pursuing something that is of a noble cause or high performance or chasing a goal or a dream or a better version of yourself. What can happen along the way when you are fighting to get to the next level, the obstacles you can run into, those enemies you can run into, that oftentimes become that head trash that stops most people from success.
So let's talk a little bit about your books. We've got some slides we're going to put up. 7 powerful techniques for effective subconscious communications. Tell us about that book first.
You know, I wrote that book because I realized that there are so many ways that the novice salesperson, the novice service provider shoots themselves in the foot. And my background in psychology, I actually have a double degree in psychology and in behavioral sciences. So what I learned in the field, in the trenches, from 13 years old to 18 was all just in the field, right? Personal experience. And then when I went to college, I picked up degrees where I learned the academic side of psychology, the way the brain works. And I combined both, right? The actual in-the-field experience, entrepreneurial experience, and the academic experience to be able to really understand the way the brain works. So I learned that if you can learn, if you are a salesperson that understands the way the other person's mind works and how really the main decision maker resides at the subconscious level, yet most salespeople are chatting with prospects at the conscious level, they're never going to really be as effective as they can be until they understand how to sell the subconscious mind, not the conscious mind, and not worry about the cognitive part of the brain, but the part of the brain that actually makes the decisions. And most people don't know that, and that's what that book's about. I
love that. And the second book, Battling the Invisible Enemy or Battling Invisible Enemies. Tell me about that. I love that name.
Well, I wrote that book for myself, and everyone just has it's privy to read it too, because I have always dealt with those enemies. And in the book, I talk about 10 enemies, and it's sort of a downward spiral that ultimately leads to depression, not clinically diagnosed depression, but the depression that most people struggle with when so many things don't go right, and they don't know how to control that downward spiral.
And that book is probably even more timely now because of the pandemic. I know, I'm an optimistic guy. I would bounce out of bed every single day. Today's going to be better than yesterday. But during the height of the pandemic, when we're all on lockdown, we couldn't be in our beautiful studios. And I told my wife, I said, I'm just having these little flashes of depression. And it's not like me. And I self-diagnosed. I get energy from people. I have to be around people. So now that I'm back in the office and I'm around people all the time, I'm not suffering from that. But maybe some advice for people who are suffering from pains of depression related to the pandemic, isolation.
Well, I did a talk yesterday for a huge corporation. And one of the things we were talking about was how to experience well-being, how to begin living a life where you have a sense of well-being. And how do you avoid arriving at a place where you are experiencing depression is first focusing on the things that help you feel well. And that is monitoring what causes you to have negative emotions, negative thoughts. And sometimes the way you can begin to barricade yourself is to avoid negative people, avoid negative environments, avoid the chatter that people are having around you that can bring your spirit down, bring your vibrations down. That's the first thing. You have to know how to barricade yourself from negativity. And then you have to learn how to control those natural thoughts that we have when things don't go right. Fear, worry, anxiety, discouragement. And understanding where discouragement comes from, which is, discouragement is 2 steps away from depression. And if you're discouraged too often, which discouragement means that something didn't happen when you wanted to, so it's a part of delay, but also something didn't happen at all, which is disappointment. When you add disappointment and delay, you've got discouragement.
Wow. And
that's 2 steps away from depression. So it's understanding what these enemies are, so when they rear their ugly heads, you can battle them right away.
Wow, powerful. You are also a broadcaster. We've got some slides of you at KLIF. Tell us about your show.
Well, I'm very excited. It premieres this coming Sunday from 11 to 12. And the show is about going from a place of surviving to thriving in different areas of life, whether it's business, whether it's family, whether it's fitness, whether it's relationship. And I've got an eclectic group of guests that are going to be offering their advice and their wisdom to the listeners. So it's going to be a high-powered, high-charged show. And I think we're in a time right now that people want to hear that kind of message. They want that kind of programming. And I'm excited to put it forth.
That's wonderful. And you create some wonderful content. So I would urge my viewers and listeners to plug into all his social media. We've got a little video of you giving inspirational and tips, and you're very consistent about this. And I think that's awesome. Tell us why you do it.
Well, I think that there's a great need for it. You don't have to go very far today on social media to find multiple speakers, multiple messages on positivity and growth and development. So the question beckons, if there's an abundance of information out there, why do we still struggle? Why are people still challenged, right? So it's not that there isn't enough information, it's that the information isn't, I believe, diversified enough to reach the masses. So I try to carve out my little piece of that and give people my perspective based on my life in a way that it can inspire and encourage anyone who relates to my story.
Yes.
So my message has always been, like you say, very consistent throughout my last 35 years.
That's awesome. You have a very successful financial services business, and you have a coaching business. Tell us about the coaching business.
Well, here's what's cool. If you look at my life, and by the way, sometimes it takes a long time to understand who you are. And I wrote a blog recently that I would encourage anyone to visit my website and look at it, because it's one of the most viewed and liked and commented blogs that I've written. And it's also one of my merchandises. It says when you recognize your assignment, when you recognize your gift, you will recognize your assignment will be revealed. So when you recognize your gifts, your assignment will be revealed. When your assignment is revealed, you find your purpose. And through purpose is how you foster passion.
Wow.
Once I realized a few years ago what my gifts were, I looked back to my entire life and I realized my gifts have been pretty consistent with everything that I've done. In other words, I've stayed on the same highway, but I've created different lanes, but it's the same highway. So whether it's speaking, writing, or financial services, it's been giving people a way to understand how they can be empowered in different ways. So everything about me is about empowering people and through multiple different expressions.
We're almost out of time, so I want to give you a chance to give some final thoughts. Something that occurred to me about you, what I do know about you, is you are incredibly consistent. In order to have be fit like you are, it takes a lot of work in the gym. Where does this consistency gene come from? Is that mom, dad, or where'd that come from?
It's the environment. When you are raised in meager means, there's always something about wanting to have more in a healthy way, right? Never wanting to go back to where you came from and what you lived through, that drives you to move forward. So I think I even though my background is not something that I think a lot of people would want to trade. I'm adopted, Spanish Harlem. I mean, it's not an experience that most people would want, but I count it as an advantage, because it just continues to fuel this fire and this hunger that drives me to stay consistent, because I'm always chasing the next version of myself.
Well, steel has to go through that fire, doesn't it?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Hey, you've been a great guest. We're going to put your website up. thejmaymi.com is the website. Get a hold of him for all your coaching and inspirational needs, and make sure and follow him on Facebook. Jay, you've been great. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
You bet.
Appreciate you.
That's it for now. We'll see you next time.